Okay, that's pretty awesome. Hey, thanks. I appreciate the coffee. I think my coffee's almost empty here. That's the lovely part about dealing with digital technology is I should have known to check the to check that little digital connection first, and then of course it failed. There, yeah, I know, right? It's hilarious. Oh man, that's awesome stuff. Yeah, I went to open up that microphone, hit the mute button on a digital touchscreen, and it just said, nope, not going to do it. And so the only way around it is to just power it down. And then it comes back and says, oh, you powered it down without the proper steps. Don't do that. I'm like, yeah, well, you weren't very nice either. Okay, so this may be, I don't know, maybe fairly short. Want to just touch on a couple of different things today. This is sort of out of nowhere part two, as per the title, surfing the real World Wide Web, catching a wave. And if you haven't yet, you probably want to touch on the previous episode called Out of Nowhere from a few weeks back. And that went through, and I'll just do a brief overview here. And then I just want to tie a few things together. So, and then the follow-up to this, I think, will be actually we'll just turn a corner. Will be tomorrow morning in Ancient Wisdom. I will put a little bit of icing on the cake, but trying to keep a couple things separated. So let's go back to. Let's go back and just kind of recap. If you missed that episode, we'll jump in here with the ideas that was presented in that episode called Out of Nowhere, having to do with waveforms, basically. So we'll take a look at this one. Let me come down. Where do I want to start? Okay, so the idea of waveforms and waveform interaction with one another. So we have, hey, welcome, Ceiling Fan Man. I loved your video, by the way. If you haven't seen that, that's really the Twilight Zone. That's awesome. Crack me right the hell up. The great introduction, Richard. That was awesome. All right, so let's see here. So the idea of wave interactions with one another. We have, when waves are generated, I don't know if I have that up, but let's see if I can switch over. Let's see, do I have this? Does that work? Okay. So when you have waves, which are like this, and we'll touch on that momentarily, right? If you present those waves in conjunction with one another or in the same amplitude and frequency, you can get additive synthesis. That is, they add to one another and increase the amplitude. If you put them out of phase with one another, they will, it's destructive interference, and they can kind of shut things down. And this is one of the things that we talked about in terms of the idea of what may have happened regarding the Schumann resonance anomaly that we had over the period of about the 2nd to the 4th for about 45 hours. There was no, none of the field generators or the field receptors that pick these things up were gathering any data for the Schumann resonance. And I still haven't gotten to the bottom of that. Again, it could be a variety of different things. We just don't know for sure. But that was one of the ideas we presented as being a possibility of creating this, was that someone had generated waves out of phase with this in an effort to cancel it out. And a lot of people noted a variety of physiological and emotional response to that, even without the knowledge that that was happening. So if we go back again to this idea of wave interaction with one another, and you can kind of see what happens here. They create, complex patterns. And as they do, what we can notice is that they, when they begin to organize, then they become something recognizable. Now, these are some of the oldest forms that we see. They're called Clandy figures. And these are made simply by putting sand or some other loose media on typically a metal plate, sometimes glass plates. And the original, the guy who's named for Clandy, would then vibrate that plate with a violin bow. And so different frequencies would then create these different patterns and organize these patterns. Well, as you go more complex with that, now we call that cymatics. And cymatics then is when you introduce primarily sound, but any sort of wave like that. And again, keep in mind that a wave basically is energy moving through a media in a repetitive pattern such that it's coherent. And so we have waves that become generated. So these are cymatic images that's introduced. These specific ones are done introducing sound waves into, or different frequencies of sound waves into a media such as water in a way that they can be photographed. And so they create these beautiful patterns with some frequencies. Other frequencies and sources create ugly patterns, different sorts of things. And so one of the things, again, that let me take a look then at this. And so this is the, it's starting to look like a mandala, exactly. So when you take a look at these different quote planets or luminaries, right? Each one has their own frequency, and then when you plug that frequency into what's called a tonoscope or something that generates cymatics, these are what comes out of it. The background resonance of the universe is supposed to be a B flat, right? It's a very low tonic of a B flat, a coherent note. And what one of the other things that we know is that, again, electromagnetic waves travel that way. They travel in waves, just as does sound. A little bit different process. It's in the electromagnetic spectrum rather than sound waves, which is a pressure wave or something vibrating moving through the air or another media. Sound waves can travel through water or a solid thing like a desk or a water, but it's basically sound pressure waves that travel in a longitudinal rather than transverse wave. But in any case, it's still, coherent waveform patterns, and we can learn a lot from them by understanding the way waves interact with one another. And one of the things that we know is that all living things are electromagnetic by nature, and they exude a toroidal field. And so this is just a simple illustration of a man with his toroidal field, which is primarily generated from the heart. The heart is by far far more than the brain, about 60 to 600 times, depending on what scale you use, more intense than the brain is the heart in terms of exuding an electromagnetic field around the body. And we also now know that there is what's called the belly brain, or there's neuroreceptors that are within the abdomen and the thorax area that not only send out but receive information about the world, primarily in an electromagnetic way, around you. And so this field goes about a meter in all directions around you. It's about a 6-foot bubble there. And imagine that it's a 6-foot space that they want us to keep for social distancing, which keeps us from interacting with one another, because the idea of entrainment is that patterns or waveforms that come in contact with one another can get into entrainment, or they begin to model or begin to represent one another. And I demonstrated this before by showing a bunch of metronomes, all started at different frequencies, and then they all just lined up. And this indicates right here, this is called human entrainment, and this illustration that I'm showing you right now demonstrates that you have two different people, and they begin to both in an electromagnetic and an electroencephalogram way begin to become entrained with one another when in proximity. And the closer the proximity, the more entrained that you are. So whenever you, for example, give somebody a big hug, you're giving them both contact and putting almost heart-to-heart communication. And so when you're having a heart-to-heart talk, that's actually kind of what's happening. And we can see this again with the demonstration of electromagnetic fields as they come in contact with one another. So that's kind of where I left off with this idea primarily on out of nowhere, presenting these ideas that this is how I essentially see the world. And the idea that, again, that the periodic table that we're presented and the idea of chemistry is badly misdescribed, that primarily what we're working with are different frequencies, and those harmonies and the frequency patterns that different materials take is not based on atomic weight, but rather the frequency that it stays at. It's a coherent, cogent frequency that it stays at in such a way that creates the physical things around you. Hey, Bob, thanks. And welcome. And so welcome to everybody. Again, it was kind of a weird start. It's always something. So we got Bunny, as far as I can tell. We got Sengeman, Francis Sage, Nachikita, of course, all the usual suspects, Allison Briscoe, Sue Finelli, my my close friend, and I'm proud to be her friend. She's awesome. Kevlar, and we got Winston, of course, and again, all the usual suspects, and I think Joe Ray was here earlier as well. So yeah, anyway, so this is the stuff that I kind of wanted. This is where I landed last time, and then I got again kind of another, I don't know, download or different look at these things in light of some other things, and I wanted to kind of get there, but it was a bit information overload at the time. So I was watching or listening, I guess rather, during my drive yesterday to Jeranism and his Friday Lounge, and there was a guest on there, and he was talking a bit about gematria, and something you guys are probably familiar with. Let me switch over here. So the idea of gematria, right, is that we have words that you assign values to letters of words, and then words have a value that can be assigned to it, and then you can combine those and look at the meaning of both numerology, the inherent meaning of numbers or the implied meaning of numbers, as well as associated numbers. So the things that have associated values could be related to one another, and it presents this idea. And there's a variety of different ways to look at gematria, right? The earliest that I know of is Hebrew gematria, based on the ancient Hebrew language. And this is what the Bible code comes from. When you take a look at the book of Genesis, it has, remarkable layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of mathematical formulas written into the way that it was written. It's just mind-blowing when you started getting into the depth of it. And so the idea of a Bible code, right, is that there was this gematria presents other words that appear, and if you look at those words, it seems to predict a whole bunch of things and tell a second story. I mean, it's just mind-blowing when you really get into it. But the idea of gematria itself and sort of numerology as well, one of the things that we noticed, and this is kind of what brought this line of thinking up, had to do with all the numerology that appeared in predictive programming regarding the anniversary, the 19th anniversary of yesterday's date. Again, 9/11, right? So 19th anniversary, 9/11, and the big event. And then all of the predictive programming that appeared, including the 911 that appeared sort of upside down. They use the reverse as above, so below. You'll see that all the time with the Twin Pines Mall becoming the Lone Pines Mall in Back to the Future, as well as there were dozens, and I do mean hundreds, really, of things that, again, if you look back in retrospect, and again, some people will say this is, if you look in retrospect, it's much like Nostradamus. You can take something that's sort of vague and obtuse. If you look at it at an oblique angle after the fact, you can sort of make it fit anything. And I suppose there's some truth to that. But some things are so, you would have to be, again, a coincidence theorist of the highest degree to believe that when you start to put all this stuff together, the mathematical probabilities against it are phenomenal. Really, really ridiculous that all these things would appear in such a way that do seem to be in some ways organized, cohesive, and meaningful. And then you start to look at it, and you just especially if you start listening to guys like Marty Leeds and Zach Hubbard, guys that really get into this stuff, it's almost overwhelming, right? And that's something that the guest mentioned yesterday, is that some people don't like to look at this because at one level, it can be overwhelming. If you spend really a lot of time looking into it, then you start to see numbers everywhere, and you start to put these things together, and it can, take over your life. And on the other hand, people who do that and then show these sort of things, if someone's not familiar with it, they look at somebody saying all this stuff, and, this is 42, and this is, 19, and this is the square root of this. And then, you kind of look at it and you go, okay, I think you step away from the pipe, dude. You had a little too much ganja, man. So it becomes easy to sort of dismiss those things because it just seems so crazy. And some of them, I got to admit, some of them are kind of a stretch, and you get out there. And, and there was, again, I'm never, knocking anybody, but there was a couple of things that I noted that the guest yesterday said. And so I wanted to, that's really more the content of tomorrow's program. But a couple of things, again, my red flag goes up there because it damages credibility when a couple of questions gets asked. fast, or they begin to make a claim and they go, well, I think it's sort of like this, or if I think I remember, and then they build a whole claim based around that, which is demonstrably wrong, right? And this happens a lot of time, for example, with Scripture. People say, oh, I think it says this, and then they come up with this whole idea, and it's completely no, right? Or, yeah, I think this adds up to this. Well, okay, in what cipher? Because, again, there's the Hebrew cipher, simple English, perfect English, simple English gematria, there's reverse ordinal, there's even Luciferian. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways that you could approach this thing. And so what has meaning? The point and the object that I want to get to this morning is that in some ways they may all have a meaning, but you'd have to, again, when you start to consider the level of complexity that gets involved with these sorts of things, when you begin to look into things, for example, like 9/11, and see how many things seem to indicate something of this nature, that there's numbers, a series of numbers are encoded, and how many related things are there, it becomes like mind-blowing. Like, who could sit down with a slide rule or even a computer and figure out all the names that you want to put into it, like all the people involved, and you start doing their names and you find out they all, add up to a certain value, or their related values, right, or their inverse values. And so when you begin to put all these together, you go, God, fuck, who would have the time to sit down and do all this stuff? Well, to some degree, we can say that if we approach this, as many of us do, with the idea that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and wickedness in high places, that these are spiritual. It's a spiritual battle that we're fighting, not a physical battle. Then that those who are in opposition to us as humanity are not human. Now, they have people who are human, or once were, right, who assist them, and they take a deal, if you will, for power or different things that they would want, a promise of whatever, to engage in that and to sort of be the physical manifestation of those ideas in this plane of existence. But that ultimately, when you look at the plans and how they've developed and unfolded over time, it does seem beyond human. In other words, people, the nature of people is they just don't have that kind of long-term view. They cannot really plan things out that long in advance, or certainly people do things for their own personal gain. And so to behave in a way that really demonstrates generations-long plans, and that they get carried through not only to fruition, but with very precise, very precise execution. It's just not within the nature of man to be have that quality. They usually want to grab the gold themselves, right, as quickly as they can. So it does it strongly suggests that those who are really pulling the strings would be, from our point of view anyway, immortal, or living such a long lifespan as to appear to a human being to be immortal, tens of thousands of years. And they're very, very intelligent. Now, could they just do this stuff, pull it out of their butt, and introduce names or situations and stuff? Sure. They could do that, I suppose. But what would be the meaning behind it? Okay, so there's the idea that some of this is related to what we would call sigil magic, or writing things down. Certain letters or certain symbols have an inherent power to them, and when you express that as will, and again we've talked about this before, the idea of manifesting your will, such that with the proper intention, you can to some degree begin to manifest these ideas into a physical way, into the world around you in a physical manifestation of will. And now we're bordering on magic, right? What seems like magic, and that's pretty much the express intention of what magic is to manifest one's will into the world. So am I suggesting that magic exists? I think I'm more than suggesting it. I'm saying that it would appear, again, as you look back through history, as convoluted as it is, that so many cultures included magic, or this idea, in their culture. and to such a degree as those who were adept at it had and wielded a great deal of power. They were always close to the king or to those who wielded ultimate power. He always had magicians, wise men, wizards, soothsayers, viziers around them to advise them, and often dealing with astrology as well. And making manifest these things. So it certainly seems as though, at least in the past, these things were considered not only, as we do now, just easily dismissed, but very powerful, very potent, and very valuable. And people don't do things like, again, invest that kind of energy in things that don't provide some sort of return. There is no, you're not going to, do wishful thinking for hundreds of years and, dupe people, with simple parlor tricks. It just seems unlikely that you'd be able to do that for a period of time by, cheap conjuring tricks. Without there actually being some power. And this is the same way that I look at this when people, we get into the very ugly topic of people sacrificing other lives, humans and animals, but especially humans and young children. So without getting too deep into that, but we are told again throughout history that many people sacrificed their own children. So what does it take to do that, right? What kind of sick person, a demented person does that? And again, my suggestion, my observation is that this may not be simply a matter of, again, wishful thinking, or that they're just demented, but they're kind of, they're getting something out of it. They are engaging in something for which they have evidence to believe and to continue to believe that doing so increases their power, increases the probability that they're going to get the things that they want, or they're so tied in that they must do it to appease some minor deity. Or this is certainly the case when you look at, again, the ancient cultures like the Mayan culture and those that engaged in this, ritual human sacrifice. Am I a fan of that? Well, and there's Nemo saying, me talking about magic. Well, again, am I a fan of it? Do I practice magic? No. Well, not in the sense of, practical magic or reciting incantations and spells. But what I'm saying is the substrate of the universe is such that, again, these are my observations and my perspective on things. So you can take it or leave it. I'm just revealing what I have come to over a period of time by observing these things and putting a few things together, which is that the substrate of the universe is such that it was from the very outset intended to manifest the will of mankind. That's in the same way that the Word of God, He spoke things into existence and it manifested. And He made us in His image and in a plane of existence that was designed to be a mini-me. Right? So again, as above, so below, to the next level. Yes, I do make my coffee with magic. It's the power of intention, right? And so wouldn't calling down the power of God be considered magic? In a way, yes, Winston. I think that, again, it depends on how you define magic. And so if you simply define magic as the manifestation of will, in that sense, yes. If you define magic as what we come to understand as the specific occult practice of spell casting and bending things to your will for the expressly secular purpose, or on your own, or with the assistance of supernatural beings who provide that for you. And when I say supernatural beings, I'm not talking about the Creator in this sense. Then that's a different thing altogether. And that's the kind of magic that I think that, again, from my observation and from the way I read it, that Scripture warns us against, because it does open the doorway to being, that again, you think you control it, but as it turns out, it's controlling you. And so we get into this kind of weird thing. We see this over and over again also in Scripture, that it tells you to avoid, not only necromancy and enchantments, but also divination. And yet, divination is exactly what casting lots is. That was done by priests all the time. They had the ephod. That was a form of divination. The Uman and the Thummim. All these things are again forms of divination that they used expressly. And so, what do you do with that? Is it hypocrisy to the nth degree? Well, again, I think much of it has to do with the intention behind it. So the one done by the priest was specifically and expressly seeking information and from the Creator to tell us your will. And then when you get into doing it for your own purposes and to try to peek around the corner and to gather information beyond the veil for purposes, again, selfish or nefarious, then again, you're beginning to open the doorway to influences that you probably want to stay away from. Now, again, this is where it gets into some really awkward territory here, and I know that there are some who are, focused on calling everybody, Satan worshipers and worse, but I don't really care about that. But what I do want to get into is again, better understanding some of these things, because I'm just looking for the truth. I'm just trying to find out the nature of the world around us. And as I always say, if anyone lacks wisdom, let them ask Dad. Right? I don't really have the answers for you, and I can't. I'm not going to sell it to you in a book. I'm not going to get you to sign up for $100 a month and come learn from me. That's not how I do it, because I don't think I have the answers. I think Dad has the answers, and I think he reveals it to those who go seeking after it. And I can share with you the stuff that I believe has either been I've chased it down or what have you. I'm willing to share. It's not mine. It doesn't belong to me. And again, some of it, is speculation and a hypothesis on my part. And so not only could I be wrong, but I expect to be to some degree mistaken just by virtue of data anemia. I just don't know. Even things where you get it right, you're only looking at a very small part of the bigger picture. And so as a result, you can only describe the things that you can see. And so you don't have a clear view of the entire thing. You only have a clear view of the angle, right, from which you see those particular aspects. And even then, in just a small micro dimension of a greater whole, right? So if we're dealing with multiple dimensions, as I believe we are, then still we're limited just to the 4 dimensions that we're able to perceive around us, which is height, length, breadth, and depth, and time. So and that's really kind of all we know. But there is, again, from my observation, it would definitely appear that we're dealing with a multidimensional reality, such that we are, if you want to think of it as a tesseract or a shadow, 4 dimensions is to 3, is 3 is to 2. So if you hold a coffee cup up to the light and it casts a shadow, the shadow is in the exact shape, or at least a distorted shape, of the coffee cup based on the angle of incidence of the light and the reflection off of the source. But it is not, it lacks the depth, right? It's a 2-dimensional thing. Well, in the same way, the 3-dimensional height, breadth, and depth that we experience is, again, scaled down from larger dimensions. And so, again, this is kind of in keeping with the as above, so below, and that we are a holographic representation of a larger universe. So I hope I haven't lost you completely with these ideas. I'm just now kind of digging in to go to the next bit here. So, all right. So, got any questions so far? Do I need to clarify any of that? I'll pause for a moment. Light a cigarette. I really am trying to quit. But so let me see if you got anything I need to clarify before I move on. Hope you guys are doing well today. I see Mojo Shop has joined us, as well as Francis Sage. Where do babies come from? Storks. Everybody knows that. Come on, buddy. So totally unrelated. Hey, thank you. I appreciate that, Kelor. I just kind of grab a little thing that I think will. I just grab some stuff I think works. Try to help keep the motion going between static images and visuals. All right. So. Let's then move on. Hey, Martin, welcome. Glad that you're here, Bradley, as well. All right. So Kelly F.E., thanks for joining us. All right, so yeah, this idea then of, I want to kind of press a little further into this idea of the interconnectedness of all things. And I mentioned this before in the Out of Nowhere episode, but just just barely got to touch on it. And I think I want to spend just a bit more time on it today with this idea of how it relates then to gematria and some of these other things. So to me, the idea of gematria works on the very same principle as, for example, reading tarot cards, casting the I Ching, reading tea leaves, entrails, all this sort of stuff. All works basically on the same principle. And that is the interconnectedness of all things. And so if you're looking at this ocean right here, think of the luminiferous ether, if you will, as the energy, the electromagnetic energy that is all around us. And so everything that occurs creates a ripple effect. You're casting out energy. And so whether that be every living thing, and it is, all living things have an electromagnetic field, and so it puts out a coherent waveform. And as you change in your emotional substrate, your emotional life, as that begins to change, you modulate that. We can measure it. We can photograph it with Carillion photography. We can use fMRI to see it happen in real time. That as your emotions change, you manifest a different electromagnetic wave into the space around you, and literally you begin to change and modulate the world around you just by your thoughts and feelings. What happens incredibly is that when you speak something, it provides just like a spike. There's like a power spike that occurs, and so you're manifesting will around you. And when more people get together and are of one mind and begin to have this human entrainment idea, and they become in lockstep with one another, you can really put out some very, very powerful intention, such that, again, the idea of being able to manifest it in a way is certainly not only not ridiculous, but again, has been used by many groups, including those who consider themselves magicians or those who are in the dark arts. Sex magic has been used this way for millennia and described in detail, some graphic detail, by folks like Aleister Crowley, who very into butt sex was that guy. But again, to me, that seems like it's specifically a perversion of the, again, I'm not saying, butt sex between a couple is, how did we get here? But the way in which they're using it, right, is anathema to the idea of, I think, what Dad had intended for us. So they're using, again, this very powerful spiritual thing of the connection of two people in a, in this connection, because you're sex is very intimate, right? And it connects people in a spiritual way, not just, you become part of one another. It's even in Scripture it says it's very, very mysterious how this works. And so when you get into this sort of stuff, again, so they're using this idea of sex magic, right, to increase, and this is basically the way Crowley described it, to increase the power of the will, so it gets released at the point of orgasm. Again, I don't want to get too off in a corner or off in the weeds there. But just to say that these ideas are not new. And I've said before that people don't have ideas. Ideas have people. And again, I'm just looking for truth. I'm just looking for information. I don't think any information in and of itself is necessarily bad or wrong or evil, right? It's the application, what you do with that, what your intention is. So then we have this idea then of, you've got this luminiferous ether, this media that surrounds you, into which your thoughts, your emotions, your will is manifest. And every living thing is putting this out. And when you get into the interaction of those things with one another, so if I come back here and kind of, again, show you this image, right? So now you're interacting with other living beings and other thoughts and other manifestations. And so as you begin to add those up, the cumulative effect of that is going to be immense. right? When you add these things up over the whole of creation, and not just people, but all living entities, and not just the seen, but I would suggest the unseen as well, as above, so below. And so if you go again, if you look back to this idea of the toroidal field here, which is what, again, I think that from my perspective, this is where we live. That green area there would be, again, the dielectric inertial accretion disk, and that's where we live. And then we have the as above. This is, again, represented well by the blue, and this would be the dome, or the firmament. And then underneath, this would be the underworld. And represented, I think, well by these colors. I think that does a pretty good job, also showing polarity. And again, not necessarily duality, but polarity. It's a very different thing. Discussed that a little bit previously already. No need to beat that dead horse or unnecessarily flog a mortality-challenged equine American in a more politically correct way. So if you're looking then at this sort of idea, right, that this is manifesting then all around you. And so as everything begins to manifest here, and all the ideas, the beliefs, right, so one of the things that we've seen over and over, this meme has come out, right, if you think of Peter Pan, right, we have Tinkerbell, and she didn't exist if you didn't believe in her. That's the same idea that we had with, Polar Express with Santa Claus. It doesn't exist if you don't believe in it. So it's the power of belief. Even Jesus said, if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, and it would. It's the very act of belief that causes the manifestation to occur, but not just the desire, but belief, the absolute knowing that it is going to occur is in part what causes it. So how does that work? I have often said, many years ago even, when I looked at the miracles of Jesus, that what we think of as miracles is actually, we call them miracles because they are outside what we understand the laws of physics. But it's simply, to my understanding, that we don't understand all the laws of physics, or at least we're not taught them. So the idea, again, is if, we understand the laws of mass and inertia and motion. So if I set a lighter down here on my desk and it sits there, it's because there's no other force acting on it. If I take my finger and slide it along the table, did I is it magic? Is it a miracle? Well, no. What I did was I introduced another force, and so the new set of rules applies. Right, so the amount of force that I used on it was enough to overcome inertia and mass and its desire to stay where it is. So I simply called forth another set of rules that superseded that set of rules. And I believe that's exactly what, for example, the miracles that Jesus produced and were recorded in the Gospels, he was doing exactly that, simply calling forth rules, physical rules of the universe, the way it's created, to manifest itself to our command, if you will, but within the context of being consistent with that of its creator. And so because, again, my understanding, and feel free to have your own view, but my understanding is that Jesus literally was part of God. He was like torn out of him, the first fruit of all creation. So literally torn out of him. So he was, in that degree, part of God. So he understood implicitly the nature of the way things were. And so his will was harmonious with that of the Creator. And so he could call forth anything that he desired that was within that consistency. So as long as it's consistency with that, then he could call those things forth. And so walking on water, no problem. Feeding of the 5,000, no problem. He simply called into action. He exerted a force of will that was greater than the inertia already there. So let's take that then a little bit further. Okay, so we've got now these resonant fields that are all around us. And so when you then do something like, say, read the tarot, all right, again, you're casting these cards out, and they're going to be influenced by the nature of the focusing on the question, the casting of the cards, and then a person who is skilled at interpreting the way that they come out can offer some insight into the waveforms around them. The same would be true with reading tea leaves, that sort of thing. it is a form of divination. Why are we told to stay away from it? Well, again, my understanding, this is the way I see it, is that it has to do with the fact that when you're looking for information outside of just simply asking Dad, you're trying to force your will to manifest, or you're trying to get information that you don't really have a right to. And so there are those dark forces and sentient beings, not just egregores, or not just a manifestation of dark energy, but literal, intelligent beings that are evil, who are willing to whisper into your ear and get you into a contract, if you will. They start, doing this, the age-old political thing. I'll give you a little something first, and you take it, but now you're beholden to me. And the more I give you, the more you're beholden. And so if you're looking for that information and you want to get accurate information by peering behind the veil a little bit, people who are looking for that and don't have a direct relationship to Dad can be easily misled into simply just taking this information, and it is valuable, right? So they can become a tarot card reader or a soothsayer, and begin to, profit from that. And the more accurate they are, of course, the better they're going to do. And so why would they want to let that go until, again, ultimately they get pulled into a situation that they did not intend, because these dark sentient beings can certainly present themselves as angels of light. So many people say that they're channeling aliens, right, and light beings. But the information that they get from those is definitely not consistent with that of the Creator. So what do you say about that? Again, they seem to be at odds with the Creator, and so there you have. Did 9/11 pass relatively peacefully? I don't know. We certainly have a bunch of fires that they're saying is not only killed a bunch of people, but there was a headline really pushed very hard saying that they're expecting a mass casualty event. So it seemed to me like they're telegraphing that something is going to occur. If I had to guess, I would say just because of the date, it's equidistant between Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, would be the 23rd. But again, I'm not big on prognostication, but if I just look at it from a simply mathematical point of view, I get there. So I want to come back again to these ideas of waveforms and gematria, numbers, that sort of thing. So let me come down here. Where am I at? There. Okay. So again, we spoke a little bit about gematria. So here's what I think is going on. If I take, for example, just go to some simple gematria thing, and put in Great Baldini, right? So what I get is Jewish gematria comes out 278, 612, in English gematria, simple gematria 102. And then what we can do is we can look and see other words that are associated with that, right? So like ancient, or Bible, King of Kings, North, beginners, the hidden one. Right? So we have these words that would appear to be in some way sort of just associated by its value. So you can get these things and take a look at these values: fragmented, editorial, big kahuna, I am the monad, I am Thor, comets, right? So you can take these sort of things. They're not all going to necessarily be consistent with one another, but what you could certainly see is that they might have associated related value, right? So the value is similar, and depending again on which ones you go with. So in fact, we can even view rude words here. And then see if I got anything naughty in there. God's Facebook. There's with. Right, and so that's with Great Baldini. I can just take Baldini and come up with, a variety of different Ich liebe dich, right? So German for I love you. That seems appropriate. Kobe beef, that sounds delicious, right? I'm definitely down with that. So with these sorts of things, right, you can then put in stuff and say, let's see, we'll do ceiling fan man, right, since he's here. All right, and so Mason, oh, you're busted, dude. Mason confirmed. Black Pope, oh, dude, you're in trouble, man. You picked the wrong name there. Alter, Fractal, Geist is in Zeitgeist, that's Ghost. You're in trouble, dude. Anti-God, Killing Machine, man, I gotta say, ceiling fan man, you're in all kinds of trouble there. So... No, I'm just all right. So this is the basic idea of gematria, right? That these values have similarity, or something is something that is associated with one another, or they contain an associated kind of energy, or they're going to vibrate at a similar frequency. And so I think that is kind of where we're coming from. So if you add this together with the idea of, I don't know if you're familiar with so biorhythms, right? So biorhythms basically take your birth date, and they've got this idea that there's these cycles. There's a 23-day cycle of your physical biorhythm, your emotional is 28, and your intellectual is 33 days. And so as they chart these things, there are days in which you're going to be really down the bottom, right? So here, this would indicate that for me, September 25th is really bad. So on the physical, intellectual, I'm just going to be a tard on that day. But I'll be emotionally up, so that's going to make me just like manic. I'm going to be a very silly boy. Right? And so if you look at today, which is the 12th, very down emotionally, but fairly high physically and intellectually. I don't know about intellectually, but I do know that physically, difficulty sleeping last night, that sort of stuff. But emotionally, I've been really struggling the last couple of days, and here we go. You can see that clearly on this chart, right? So a little bit closer look here for those interested. And you can go to any sort of biorhythm chart and get your own, or put it in for other people, and you can kind of see what's going on if you know their date of birth, and you can see which days are going to coincide. So some of them, right, you get them really high together. So again, these aren't exactly precise, but in this area, so early October looks like a pretty good place for me there, and you can adjust this chart to your liking. Now again, I think this is somewhat coordinated. If I come down here and look at where is that? So this, and is that where am I looking for? I guess I don't. Where did it go? I had a screen that showed. Oh, there we go. Okay, so again, we have the luminaries, right? And so part of astrology has always been to include, the luminaries and their effect and influence on mankind. I think that there is absolutely something to it, or they wouldn't have been doing it forever. Right? I mean, people have been reading the stars forever. And I think just for, as is true with most things, they tell us it's nonsense so that we won't look at it. Right? And it's been said that millionaires don't use astrology, but billionaires don't do anything without it. And I think that's probably the case. Again, they know stuff about the dark arts, and they know what these influences are. Now, is it possible that the luminaries are sentient? I think so, but I don't necessarily think that that's exactly what's going on. I think these magnetic fields and their influence is primarily based on the frequencies, and the frequencies influence as they move around and as they line up, they have an effect on the electromagnetic field around us to such a degree that when we're born, or when our cycle is, it affects us in certain ways. And to me, I've always, or at least long, considered it probably has less to do with the day we're born as the day that we're conceived. I think there's definitely something to that in terms of the way when we're conceived rather than the day we're born. So that these things are all interconnected in such a way that this is how gematria and why it works. This is how the tarot works, the I Ching. All these things are consistent with these ideas. And so, again, can I prove this? At this point, I can't, again, make positive claims of certainty simply because I don't have the means to demonstrate it. But I think it could be, to some degree, if you had sensitive enough equipment, that you could certainly you could certainly show some correlation. Now, correlation is not equal to causation. We know this, but I think that you could show a number of correlation by both the location, because where you are, we know that there are ley lines on the Earth, and if you look at it from above, it does look like a mandala, the flower of life. Again, very consistent with some ancient stuff there. So I think that where you're at, when you're at, when you were conceived, and perhaps where. All of these things are associated. And that there are those who have much deeper insight than do we, but having a better understanding of how it works, again, I think can one take some of the fear out of it. Right? You don't have to be necessarily afraid of this information. But again, I think from my perspective, if you go seeking out for it on its own, as to gain insight and information that doesn't necessarily belong to you, that may be against what Dad has in mind for you. I will say, again, without getting too deep into it, that my experience, mostly with the Creator, in a personal nature, has almost always exclusively been my understanding a little bit about the world around me, but primarily His trying to heal my heart and making me a better person. And it's almost exclusively about me, not in a selfish way, but in a way that makes me, again, more like Him if possible, that it heals the wounds received long ago from the lack of love and acceptance. And once I learn to accept His love, I can better be a conduit for others and to pass His love on to other people. And we're told, again, this is my understanding, is that these are the commands, right? And this is what Jesus said. The first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and all your strength. And the second's just like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And so He also said that this is how we'll know that you're my followers, is that you love one another in the same way I have loved you, right? Not by how well you keep the rules, not by how smart you are, not by the occult knowledge that you have, not by your ability to manifest your will into the world, but rather by whether or not you love one another. And I think that there's truth in that, because I think, again, from my perspective, the Creator loves us beyond comprehension and wants the best for us. And that means to come in relationship with Him and them in such a way that they can sort of download the stuff into us. So again, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask. I think, again, I've always said that, just go to the source and get that information directly from Dad. I can't give you anything that I don't have. I can only give you what I have, and that's my perspective, and that's my limited view of everything. And so you're going to do much better off getting that information directly from the source, and untainted in that degree, because I only have the angle that I can see it. And so it's not going to be your angle, it's going to be my angle, right? Which is maybe not consistent or maybe not the right thing for you. But if you go get that information, again, that's the place to get it, is directly from the source, and not from these secondary paths, which is, again, reading the tarot and stuff. It's like, can it be helpful? Sure. I mean, because it could show you things if you're adept at reading it. But again, if your intention is only to read it and to bypass simply asking Dad, again, I think you open yourself up to influences that you may not want. And once those influences begin, those are the legal guys, they're the lawyers. They feel like they've got a contract, and they're going to demand access to you based on that agreement. So anyway, I'm just, again, I have no judgment for what anybody does, and it's not, I can't tell for certain what people's intentions are. Again, I can only tell you what I see myself. But as you get into some of these things, right, you begin to, again, manifest things which can take you in a very, very dark and unintended direction. Sort of the unintended consequences of looking for information that not necessarily intended for you to get right now, or it's not your it's none of your business, right? So it can certainly lead you down paths that you didn't necessarily want to go. And I will say that while I do not fear these dark sentient beings any longer, because I think there's a greater power than them, and that works in me, I'm certainly not a fan of them, and I don't want them anywhere around me. So to that extent, I'm not about to mess with it or recommend that anyone else does. So there's that. All right. So let's see. Do I have anything else today? I do. Again, this is where I wanted to go with that, and then I'll leave you with this idea. because I was going to start with this. This is kind of where I'm going to go tomorrow morning. A little bit of a little obtuse angle tomorrow, but I'm going to start with it here with this idea. That we have often talked, and I've mentioned a couple of times, about this idea of collectively manifesting something positive in the world. That we get together and come up with some idea that is a positive manifestation. And of course, to me, that's always about love. I really want to see love manifest in the world. And that I do know that love creates a powerful manifestation in the physical world around you. And that as we begin to do that, my observation and my conclusions are, or at least my hypothesis here, again, is this really screws up the simulations that the powers that ought not be are doing to us. Right, is they're not only trying to anticipate what we do by gathering all of our data and make simulations to not only anticipate what we're going to do, but force us into doing things that they want us to do. And the idea, again, that love countermands that. God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. Perfect love casts out fear. I think that, again, love and fear are, polar opposites. They're polarity. It's, again, not duality, but polarity. And that love has this effect. And so, considering the idea that I would, again, love to put out, I would love to put out love in a way that really affects and changes the world. I was considering that a little bit. And something that came to me, and again, this is... this may not be for everyone, right? So, but I'm going to put it out there because it came to me, was it last night at some point, right? Is that with this idea of entrainment, that it would be very difficult for us to get sort of exactly on the same thought process, right? Exactly how to manifest love exactly the same way. Without being really in tune with one another, how do we do that? And so this idea occurred to me. So I will often, I spend a pretty good amount of time, reading scripture. I read all kinds of different stuff, but I do spend time every day reading scripture. It just feeds me. Not even necessarily for the information it provides, but it does bring in... how do I put it? It seems to have life in it. It's like food for me. There is the power. There is a certain amount of power in it that just feeds me, irrespective of what the content is. But one of the things that I came up on in Psalm, picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue, right? I love that line from Airplane. But one of the things that came to me was that, especially in the modern world, most people, when they pray, even if so few people do these days, and it's, they often say that praying is when you talk to God, and, when God talks to you, that's psychosis. Well, again, I don't believe that. But most people, when they pray, it is primarily to get themselves out of a sticky situation. Most people don't even turn to their Creator or give Him any mind at all, unless they're in a sticky spot and they want help getting out of it. And then they make the promises, I swear I'll do whatever I got to do. To that degree, we spend a lot of time asking for things. And I think often very little time not only thanking and having a sense of gratitude for the things that we have been immeasurably blessed with. But one thing that certainly came to me, and this is an idea that I love, right, is that in conversations, again, it just happened recently again, but it's not the first time, and it's happened over the course of my life. I love when I meet people who I know have a relationship with Dad because they glow with the light that's in him. And so it's like a light going through a different color film or a stained glass window, right? So the light comes out through the filter of that person, but it's the same source of light, and I can tell it in an instant. And I love that. I can tell immediately when someone has that relationship, because they just glow with that light. And again, it's just a further proof to me that we're talking to the same source. And when I hear people talk about God or deity or creator, but they don't manifest that, then again, that puts up a big red flag. But without getting into that, what had occurred to me is this idea of, I don't know how quite to put it, but I'm going to do the best I can, as telling Dad how we see him, right? The beauty that he is, expressing verbally, if you can, how you see him. Again, for me, I could just start with all powerful, so this is the most amazing being that defies all logic. The most powerful thing being the most loving thing, and the depth of understanding and wisdom. One word, Rose 777 and I will often get into semantics, and one word that I don't see very often anymore, and I noticed it several times in reading scripture, was steadfast. This idea of a consistentness that people lack entirely these days. The idea of being steadfast is almost completely unknown to people. They're not steady because of constant change. Right? So we get used to this change that happens continuously. And so very few people you could consider as steadfast. But this idea that he is steadfast and unconditional love, and he is constant. And so it occurred to me that those who are willing spend some time just expressing the way that we see Dad and describing all the beauty that we see from our Creator. Tell the Creator who he is. Is it a form of worship? Absolutely. Because I love him, them. But yeah, stalwart, that's another good one. But that is what I would like to maybe try to manifest, is at the same time, because that gets us on the same, if we're talking about the same Creator, the same being, right? My experience is that those who know him, right? It's not an idea. It's not a premise. It's not a belief system. It's a person. And so if we're all focused on the same being at the same time, then we have a much better chance of being in the same tune, right? So even Jesus said, where two or more are gathered in my name, right, there is love. I'm there amongst you. And so I think that this stands a pretty good shot at manifesting something beautiful by expressing how we see our Creator, and expressing this beauty that he is represented in his creation, which is us. He made us in his own image. And so if we find that beauty in him, then we cannot help but find that beauty reflected back in us, and then expressing that around us. Right? And then we get back to this idea of these vibrational waves that express outside of ourselves and manifest into the world. And that is what I would love to see, is if we take some time, and I hope to do this tomorrow morning specifically, that we take this time and focus on Dad and just visualize and picture who he is. And to manifest that out as one. Right now there's 75 people here. We maybe do that. Maybe the same tomorrow, similar, 50-ish. But as we get this idea, and again, it has nothing to do with religion. I don't deal with religion at all, right? Because that's a belief system. But we're talking about a being, right? Our Creator, that we are created in his image. And I think everyone has access to that. If you don't, just simply ask him. Again, if anybody lacks wisdom, let him ask. And I'll just say over and over again, if anybody has any problem with the things that I offer, keep in mind, I either offer, my observations of things, I mean, I'm not lying. I might be wrong, but I'm not lying. I read scripture, so you don't have to agree with scripture, but there's that. So it doesn't come from me. And I say, go directly to the source. Go ask Dad. I fail to see anything amiss there. Right. So, if anybody has a problem with that, to me, if you're going against the idea, if you're uncomfortable with the idea of going directly to Dad, that's telling, right? If you're going to get it from any other source than the Creator, then you're going against the Creator. I don't know any other way to put that. So, I think that's it. I think that's all I wanted to express today, without again beating the dead horse or getting too deeply into it. That is where I wanted to go with these ideas. So, to that end, I would like to express love and appreciation for everyone that's here today and it comes regularly. Thank you so much for being a part of this and for joining along in this journey. It's very different than what I initially anticipated or expected, but primarily the joy that I get in it is from you. If I go back and I show you this, biorhythm for me for today, keep in mind that this is a 12. My emotions are really down, right? And so it's really difficult to want to do this. But I do it. People go, oh, just take a break. You're overloaded. I would say yes, in some degree, but this is what feeds me, right? So this is these are the things that feed me and feed my spirit, is spending time with you guys. So I can't drop that part of it. If I could, I would drop the day-to-day grind of having to make money, to pay the bills, but not there yet. So at this point, this is again my gift to you, and this is your gift to me in return, is to come and share this time together. So, again, with that, I'd like to just invite you again to come tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Pacific. That's 9 a.m. Central, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, UTC -7 for Ancient Wisdom for Modern World. We'll spend a little time just focusing on the nature of Dad and who he is. And if we can all manifest that together, I think that would be a beautiful thing. So with that, I will leave you with a little bit of parting music. Again, another song that my friend Joe Ray and I wrote. This is, 1995-ish, maybe early 1996. It was one of the very last songs that we wrote, called Q&A, Questions and Answers. And we'll leave you with that. Thank you so much, guys, for being a part of this. And I really do very much appreciate each of you. For being here and for what you bring and for the questions you ask. I have some more questions to answer tomorrow. That's part of it. I have promised some people I would answer some questions, and I'll do that. But for today, we'll end you with this. Have a great weekend, guys, and thanks again. sitting here dark. You should be almost home by now, but you're here in my heart. And yes, it makes me feel like a fool, knowing I haven't come through for you. And no, it's not the same, but I'll still call